This is Russ on the Radio Show. I am Russ Stevenson, your host. Russ on the Radio is 58 minutes of documented radio interviews of the entrepreneurial world. Just a quick story before I introduce my world-renowned guest. Since we will be talking about selling today, I am reminded of a short story. A few years back, a salesman won a trip from his company for being a top sales performer. His destination, Paris, France. When he arrived in Paris, he was staying at a very lovely hotel. One night, while having dinner, he met this beautiful woman, and they seemed to be enjoying each other's company, except for the fact he didn't speak French, she didn't speak English. Well, almost a week went by, and they were spending days and evenings together, but really couldn't communicate. One night at dinner, the woman got closer to the gentleman, started drawing a picture of a bed on a napkin. He looked at the picture, and to this day, couldn't figure out how she knew he was a furniture salesman. My special guest today is a prime example of lifelong learning. With his quest for knowledge, learning, and sharing in the areas of marketing and sales, continues to this day. He is a warm, friendly, and approachable professional. He is one of the real true pioneers of this industry. Please welcome my friend Ben Gay III to the Russ on the Radio Show. Ben, how are you?
I'm fine, Russ. I'm on the tail end of COVID. Day 23, and so all I have, and let me apologize in advance, is sometimes a little you'll hear a little stifled cough, but the worst of it is behind me.
Well, you're healing fine?
I guess. I don't get sick. I rarely get sick. I don't think I've been sick since I was a teenager. And on top of that, Gigi tells me I'm not a very good patient.
Well, say hello to her, and I hope you feel better. Jeez.
Well, thank you very much.
We're going to break about 28 minutes in, so it'll help you get some tea or something. Okay.
All right.
We know each other, so this is okay this way. All right, Ben?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, sir. Why don't you help by telling us the history of your name?
Well, the history of my name, if I need a good seat in a restaurant without having done the proper prior call, I become Dr. Ben Gay III, and it's amazing the tables you can get. The truth is, the product was originally spelled Bengue, invented by a French doctor named Dr. Jean Benjou. It had nothing to do with us. But when I was a senior, but it was pronounced by Southerners Ben Gay, and so they couldn't get us to say Benjou. So when I was a senior in high school, they changed the spelling on the package to Bengay, my way, and gave in, and they started calling it Ben Gay. And my life changed. Up until that time, it was something somebody just mentioned occasionally. But once it was official, then but as time has gone on, I turn it on and off to my advantage. Good special handling wherever I go. You get the last seat on the plane that they didn't intend to give to you, and
yes.
And I don't ever lie about it. Occasionally, someone will say, "Well, was Ben Gay your father?" And I said, "No, he was my grandfather," which is true, Ben Gay Sr. But I don't go beyond that. If that's good enough answer, I let it go. If not, I'll fess up that it really wasn't who they're thinking about.
And how I remember all your stories. And how about your son? I think it was what you were going to name him.
Yeah, there was a debate whether we should name him Ben Gay the Fourth and have him go through what I'd been through. My father to a lesser degree, my grandfather to no degree, because it wasn't a factor. But by the time I was a senior in high school, it was an issue. So when we began debating what we were going to name it, the deal with my wife at the time was, she said, "How many children do you want?" And I said, "As many as it takes to have a boy." And fortunately for her, the first time was a boy. So now we're down to the naming. And I tell audiences in the lead up to a talk, we finally settled and compromised. Instead of calling him Bengay the Fourth, we called him Absorbing Junior.
I love that. That's a great story, Ben. Even though you're a little bit under the weather, you're still the best. So
well, thank you.
You're welcome. So I have some facts here I want you to follow up with if you can.
Okay.
Is it true that you were the number one salesperson in every organization you've ever been
in? So far.
So far.
Yeah, absolutely true. I have some secrets. I come early, I stay late, I work on weekends if necessary. And so if I didn't outskill them all, I outworked them all. Cute story. Zig Ziglar and I got started in the same multi-level marketing company on the same day in the same meeting, Wednesday, September 15th, 1965 in Atlanta, Georgia. It was called Holiday Magic Cosmetics. And we both answered the same little ad. Well, Zig was 18 years older than I was, had been in selling probably most of that time. And he was already a good speaker. I wasn't a speaker at all. I didn't even know that came with a package. So, we both get in on the same day. I had a business partner, Jimmy Rucker, the greatest salesman I ever personally worked with. And about 6 months into our business, they announced a nationwide year-long contest, a sales contest. And first prize was a mystery prize. Second prize was a Rolls Royce. Third prize was a Cadillac, and so on. So the contest started, and I'm not a contest type guy. I do everything I can all day, every day. And if that wins the prize, great, but I'm not holding back to win something. That was a philosophy taught to me by my father. So at the end, near the end of the contest, I knew we were doing well, but it really wasn't a big factor in my life. And then we got a call that we had won, Jimmy and I had won the mystery prize. We'd won the nationwide sales contest. Well, then we started looking back as to when it ended. On the night it ended, Zig was in Columbia, South Carolina, having a victory dinner because he was confident he had won. Jimmy and I were in Atlanta holding an opportunity meeting for 100 people or whatever. And we had a pretty good closing rate all the time. And that night we had a very good closing rate. And as it turned out, we won the contest almost to the dollar by the amount we had sold in that meeting the last night while Zig was having his victory celebration. So
wow.
Zig was fond of telling me that I only won because of that one meeting. I said, yeah, well, that was sort of the point, Zig. It was a year-long contest, and you chose to celebrate too soon. Arnold Palmer used to tell a great story about celebrating your victories too soon. He was up 2 or 3 strokes in a tournament coming down the 18th, as the story goes, and he sees a friend of his over on the rope line. So he walks over, and the friend said, congratulations. And Arnold said, okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And I had a good day and so on. And it turned out the good day wasn't over yet. He wound up losing the tournament by a stroke. And he said, never take your victories before they're done. And that's what Zig had done and what we didn't do. Although I have to admit, to be totally honest, we didn't do it to beat him. As I said, I didn't know we were that close or what the deal was dollar-wise. We just did it because that's what you do in that business. In those days, you held meetings 7 nights a week if he could round up a crowd 7 nights a week. And we did. And then when I would talk to Zig, now I'm president of the company and he works for me, I would talk to Zig from time to time, and we were buddies. So if I was having a rough day or things weren't going right, I would feel free to talk to him a little bit about it. And occasionally I would say, Zig, here's the deal. You fly out or drive out to California, bring the rolls with you, give me the keys to the rolls, and I'll give you the key to the front door of this building. And he said, oh, no, you won fair and square.
And I don't know whether everyone knows about holiday magic and how it was so critically important to the rest of everything. Is it not true?
Absolutely. It was the number one multi-level marketing direct sales company in the world, larger than Amway and Shackley combined. And it had started in 1964. Zig and I joined in 1965. So it was a new company. And we took it, when I was president, we took it up to $1 million a day in income, adjusted for inflation. That was, years ago. That's about $3.5 billion in today's money. And we were doing it in 1966, 67, and up into the early 70s. So it was a huge operation. It's how I wound up meeting all the people that I've known. If you were in public speaking, wanted to hold a rally, become well known, etc., you wanted to get on our stage, Holiday Magic Cosmetics stage, because we were holding, routine meetings with 10, 15,000 people in them every night at 7 o'clock local time, wherever you were. Someone stepped to the front of the room and said, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is so-and-so. I'm a general distributor with Holiday Magic. And word for word gave a script, a 37-minute script. So we were like a machine, a selling machine, the biggest in the business. So that's how I met Dr. Napoleon Hill, Og Mandino, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a long list of famous people. And they came to us because we were the hot thing happening at the time. Now, that said, I didn't give my age. I was president of the company and running this huge operation internationally with 5 subsidiaries that all had the same marketing plan. It was just different products, motor oil additives, Bob Cummings vitamins, and so on. I was 25 and a high school graduate. There is no normal definition that would have qualified me for that job. I just outworked everybody.
I didn't know that part. That's unbelievable. For those who aren't there might be a few who don't know about Norman Vincent Peale and Napoleon Hill and his writings. Can you go over a little bit of that?
Well, they were the top people in the industry at the time as far as authors, speakers, and so on. Earl Nightingale was the voice of Holiday Magic. I hired him to do all of our recordings and recruiting material and so on. So, and Dr.
So you hired him?
Yeah. We were his largest customer to start with because I didn't know how to build a training program. So what I did was I bought all of his material and had it private labeled. His most famous recording was The Stranger's Secret. And if your listeners have never heard it, get a hold of it and listen to it once a day till you've done that for a month, and then listen to it once a month for the rest of your life. It is a magnificent recording about human potential and success and how to get ahead and so on. So we took that, and then he had a bigger program, sort of The Stranger's Secret on speed, called Lead the Field. And so we just changed it to Lead the Field with Holiday Magic, or Lead the Field with Stay Power Motor Oil Additives, or Lead the Field with Bob Cummings Vitamins, or whatever. So it gave me a built-in program, and after I listened to it in enough meetings and so on, I said, we should make this official. He should be the voice of all of these companies. So he was. we had a recruiting record. It was hard to get people to follow scripts and so on. So a little record, a flexi record. You may remember those that you could tear out of a magazine. It was square, but it was made out of some sort of pliable plastic. And it was small enough where it was square, but you could put it on a record player and it would play, even though normal records were round. And so I had Earl, I wrote with him. He was a magnificent writer. We wrote one called Invitation to Success. So people who were afraid to invite somebody to a meeting, we said, just hand them the record. And Invitation to Success, Earl would invite them to the meeting. And then after the meeting was over, you, of course, should post-sell. Some of them weren't bright enough to learn that script. So we had a recording by Earl that post-sold them on the decision they made. And then they wanted to move up and become the top position, a general distributor, which had other qualifications. I had him do a recording called the General Idea to be a general distributor. And so Earl became, if you were anywhere near a Holiday Magic event, you could hear his voice somewhere. He was the most listened to radio voice in the world, heard daily on over 700 radio stations in the United States and Canada. When we hired him, or that came shortly thereafter, because he helped us and we helped him. You got time for a funny Earl Nightingale story?
We have time for you for anything. Go.
Oh, bless you. Let me apologize in advance. The language is a little rough, but it's true. Belltone hearing aids used him as their voice over also. And so one day, Lloyd Conan, his partner, came to him and said, here's the rough script. I know you want to change it. And Earl said, fine, what is it? And he said, well, this is a Belltone hearing aid Christmas message to all their distributors. And Earl was a speed reader and a cold reader. You could hand him the phone book and he could sit in a radio booth and do it and not miss a word anywhere in it. First time he ever saw it. So Earl picks it up, scans through it, and says, this is horrible. It's yucky, and I don't want to talk that way. You know, Yuletide greetings to yours and you and yours. May the snowflakes dance in your hair type thing, which was not Earl. He was very sardonic and that deep voice. You felt like God was talking to you. And Lloyd had to break the news to him. He said, well, Earl, this isn't a matter of your personal taste. This is what they want. They're our second largest client. And if you don't do it, they will go away. And we, therefore, will go away. So Earl says, all right. So he goes in the booth. He has a radio engineer that's worked with him for years at that point and worked with him all the way to the day he died in retirement in Arizona. And this guy had gotten spoiled because Earl, as I said, could cold read anything. Just hand him a sheet of paper and he'd say, hello, this is Earl Nightingale, and off he would go. And so he admitted to me later that perhaps he didn't always listen to every word. He just kept one eye on Earl through the glass to see if he was done. If he was done, he hit stop, and they pressed the records back in those days, and off they went to everybody. So they did that with the Belltone thing. A few days later, I'm in Chicago in their office, and they're trying to convince me to do the Flexi record thing that we were just talking about, and I'd never seen the Flexi records. So I said, well, how do they sound? And I said, well, here, and they go out in the hallway, and there's 10,000 Belltone hearing aid distributor mailings out there, and each mailing is the Belltone Christmas message from Earl Nightingale. And they just picked one out of the pile, brought it in, folded it open, put it down on the record player, and played it. They said, you'll get a kick out of this because it's not Earl's style. Therefore, I listened to the whole thing. And the quality of the recording was quite good, and he was Earl Nightingale and so on. At the end, while the record is still playing and I'm sitting there, you hear Earl say, well, this is Earl Nightingale, and that's the Christmas message from Belltone hearing aids. Pause. Jesus Christ, what a crock of shit.
And that's a real life.
That was on all of the 10,000 records. And the vice president of the company, who was the one selling me on this idea, threw his body over the record player like that would make the problem go away. I said, Les or Ron, there were two of them, I don't know which one it was. I said, this record is not your problem. It's the 10,000 out in the hallway waiting for the postman. So they ran out there and stopped that. A few months later, I'm back in Chicago and we're telling the story, and Earl was laughing. They had to eat the records, re-record them quickly and remail them. And Earl said, fortunately, Ron and Les got them all. And I said, well, not all. And Earl said, what? And I said, well, they were playing one on the record player. And when they went out to stop the 10,000 from going out, I put that one in my briefcase. So at some point, Earl, there may come a time when I will offer to sell you the only original recording left of that event. And he was kidding with me over the years. How much do you want, Ben? Just tell me. How much do you want?
Oh, that's so good. I can see him saying that. I never met him, but I listened to his material for ages. Great story, Ben. Unbelievable. So I don't know how we top that. Well, it's been said that you're a student of professional selling. How did you get involved with I have a pitch in the middle of the show, but I'm going to let you pre-pitch me about the closers.
Well, the closers, which if your listeners are not familiar with it, the closers, we now call it part one because there's a part 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. But the closers part one has become the best-selling, most powerful, most popular book on selling and closing ever written. And the reason it exists is I started the call center industry with the National Communications Center back in 1976. That was the first nationwide toll-free call center, order-taking center, answering service, etc.
Well, that right there is got to put you in that's I don't know whether everybody understands that. But 800 numbers, go ahead. It's so critical.
Well, if you've ever dialed an 800 number to buy anything in those early days, you probably called my office.
Really?
Later on, we had other competitors, and of course, it spread out, and other people started getting their own 800 numbers. But back then, you couldn't afford an 800 number. They were $10,000 per line per month in advance. And then at the end of the month, you got a bill for overtime, anything over 240 hours. So what I figured out, I was an early participant in the timeshare industry, that I could timeshare an 800 number. We all dialed the same number. It was 800-824-7888. I still have that number. If you dialed it right now, it would ring in my pocket. But you dial that, and then when one of our reps answered, they would either give us the operator number or we would ask for the operator number, and that determined which script you read to them, and then took the order. So that's how the 800 number industry started. They already had 800 numbers for commercial use among big companies for transferring data, but we took it to the masses and changed the way everybody shops and to this day, in addition now to websites and so on. So my duty everybody in the company had a job. They all had an art pen, one of those cutters where you can slice out, there's a better word for it, but it's not coming to me right now, where you can cut things out of a magazine and the edges will be neat and clean and all. My assignment was the Wall Street Journal every day. Go through it, find somebody that doesn't have an 800 number, which was everybody in those days. 86% of all Americans when we started the company didn't know that a toll-free number was free to the callers. And so they would talk fast because it was long distance and yell because it was long distance. And cutting out ads one day, I saw a little ad, a one ad that said something about closing. And so that caught my eye. A, it didn't have an 800 number, and B, it said something about closing. So I cut it out, clipped it to a typing request, and was going to send it down to word processing to have them send out the 5 letters or start the 5-letter series that would go out to a prospect. And then I thought, closing, what? And so I read the ad a little more carefully, and it appeared like it might be a book. It was a horribly written ad, but it mentioned some dollar amount, $24.95, $14.99, whatever it was in those days. So on a hunch, I clipped one of my personal checks to the typing request and sent it down. And I never, Russ, thought of it again. If they had not sent the book, I wouldn't have known. I didn't balance my own checkbook, so I wouldn't have known whether it cleared or didn't clear or what have you. Forgot about it. About 3 weeks later, this package arrives that looked like something the Unabomber would send you. Today, I would probably have someone open it out in the yard with sandbags around it. But back then, I ripped it open, and it was, the address was in crayon or marker's pen or something. I ripped it open, looked at the book, and it was, I had it over the trash can to throw in. It was horribly bound. About half the pages flew out when I flipped through it. The little I read, the printing was horrible. The grammar was bad. The spelling was worse. I mean, it was the worst book I've ever seen. But being cheap and facing a flight to New York before round-the-clock movies and so on, I threw it. My briefcase was right next to the trash can. I threw it in and thought, well, I'll read it on the plane, and then I even had a plan for getting rid of it. I will leave it in the seat back pocket and let the cleaning crew get it when I'm done with it. So I get on the plane, start reading. I had found the Dead Sea Scrolls of selling. In spite of all its faults, the material, the concept in it, and the material was unbelievably strong. As one of my customers said to me one day, I started reading it. I got up and shut the door because I didn't think I should be caught reading this material because it gives me an unfair advantage. So land in LaGuardia, go over to the pardon me, go over to the payphone on the wall.
That's okay. Take your time. You want to break? You want to break here for a second?
I'm fine.
Okay.
So I go over to the payphone, dial the number in the back of the book, and I said to this gentleman who answered the phone, hi, I just finished reading the closers and I want to talk to somebody. And he said, well, Mr. Gay, how are you? And I said, I didn't give you my name. And he said, well, if you've read the closers, your name is Ben Gay. You live in Placerville, California. And I said, how'd you know that? He said, we printed 500 copies of the book on the, I can't think of a right word, but they did it illicitly. One of them worked in a print shop, so they snuck back in at night. None of them had ever printed a book or bound a book or anything, which accounted for that. And the person who wrote the first draft of it was a borderline illiterate, but he knew how to sell. So that accounted for the bad writing. He said, we printed 500 copies. We ran one ad one day in the Wall Street Journal. We sold one book. So if you've read the closers, your name is Ben Gay III, and you live in Placerville, California. I said, well, you got me there. I said, listen, I'd like to, as horrible as these are, I'd like to buy some and give them to my people. He says, okay, how many you want? I said, how many do you have? He said, like I said, we printed 500. We sold one. I don't have to count them. I have 499. And so I said, I'll take them. And then, long story somewhat shorter, I decided to market it. My people loved them so much. So I got the rights to rewrite it, re-edit it, and publish it ourselves, get the rights to it. And they sold one book. When we quit counting 30 years ago, we had sold 10.5 million of them, making it the best-selling, most popular, most powerful book on selling and closing ever written. And it was started because I was trying to sell them an 800 number.
Wow, what a story. Ben, let's take a quick break to give you a chance to grab something to drink. It'll only be a minute or so. How's that?
All right, fine.
Quick break. My special guest today, Ben Gay III, has the most famous and powerful books on closing sales ever written. In fact, I have a box full of these books, and anyone who calls in or contacts Russ on the radio at gmail.com. Ben was generous enough to give Ben Gay III live in seminar and Sales Closing Power, a book by J. Douglas Edwards, plus the Closer series. I'll give them to you. And I just gave one to my technical consultant, and he's reading it because everybody's got to sell, don't they, Ben?
As Elmer Wheeler famously said, nothing happens till somebody sells something.
There we go. So we're back with Ben Gay III. Did that give you enough time?
Yep.
Okay, we're good. I hope I did you proud on the book description.
You did. Sales Closing Power, not the closers is the center of our life, but Sales Closing Power, the book you referred to, it says by J. Douglas Edwards on the front, but it was written for Doug's family after he died. He'd never written a book. So I took all my notes from working with Doug Edwards and his recordings and put them into print. So that's where that comes from. If you're of a certain age, like me, you were trained by J. Douglas Edwards. If you're of a younger age, the person who trained you was trained by somebody who was trained by J. Douglas Edwards. He was the king and the beginning of modern sales training.
And I think you said he was the best sales trainer or salesman ever lived. Is that, did I quote?
No, the best salesman I ever personally worked with was my business partner, Jimmy Rucker. He was just a born natural. And he swore by J. Douglas Edwards. But Jimmy was not a good sales trainer. He was a wonderful salesperson, but not a good sales trainer, because his training, he'd get up the front of the room. He said, well, just watch me and do what I do. He was a natural. Unconscious competent, they call it. And he was an absolute natural. Doug Edwards was scripted, everything he said, and I still use a lot of his stuff verbatim. He said, for instance, if you have a built-in objection to your product, price, size, whatever, if you have a built-in objection, bring it up first and brag about it instead of sitting there waiting for the other shoe to drop. He was famous for saying, if you have a closing question, shut up. In seminars, he would scream, shut up, you shut up, and several other things along the way. Now, that said, and he's gone now, so I can talk openly about him, he was on a personal level, a total jackass. But but on stage, he was really something, decades ahead of his time.
I know we've talked before, and you said you would use direct sales, and I'm probably quoting it wrong, but more than any other profession in the world. Am I coming close?
For starting out?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say network marketing, multi-level marketing is what it used to be called, is a great starting point, because you pick a company and get started for $20 or something. And when Jimmy Rucker and I joined the business, we split the cost of joining. It was $91.41 total to get a little sample package and start selling. And we scraped together enough to pay that. Waiting for us to be paid, we were paid that Friday. This was a Wednesday. So we waited. Jimmy was single. I told him he didn't need as much money as I did because I was married. So we took his check. I owed him half of it, but took his check, and that's how we got in the business. No qualifications, as is true in much of selling, unless it's high tech. So 2 high school graduates who had trouble scraping together $91, got into a business, traveled all over the world, made millions, and are still riding that little one ad I answered on Wednesday, September 15th, 1965, still writing that little ad, 55, almost right at 60 years later.
Let's add on to that point that you just made. We talked one time and you said, this is the way you make $1 million a year based on a daily income. Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah. It's $2,789. I rounded it up to $2,800. People say, I want to make $1 million. Well, the figure doesn't even mean anything to them. And along about June, they haven't made $500,000, so they lose faith, and they get ready to make the next New Year's resolution. But if you break it down by the day, $2,739 and some odd cents per day, that's doable.
I thought that was unbelievable. I mean, it's great in its simplicity.
Yeah. And, Russ, if you don't make the 2,800, I made it 2,800 because I wasn't bright enough to remember the more complicated figure. If you don't make it one day, the next day you don't have to make 5,600. The next day you still have to make 2,800. It's a day. It keeps the goal right in front of you all the time. I once had a wonderful little string of 14 days in Norway. They paid me my speaking fee at that time. I think it was $9,500 a day times the 10 talks they wanted me to give. And they bought 50,000 copies of the Closers. Part 1, I think, is all we had at that time. The Closers, etc. So it was a big 11-day payday anyway. And then the last day we were there, they had a board meeting. Dinner, but it was really a board meeting. They announced they were giving me 14% of the company, which at that time was trading on the European Stock Exchange for about $14 million. So 14 million plus 9,500 times 10 plus 40,000 books. I made, $14-15 million in a 10-day period. And I was talking to a friend of mine. He said, wow, you don't have to work for the next 14 years. And I said, no, tomorrow I have to make $2,800. It's $2,800 every day, regardless of how much you made the day before or the week before or the month before. If it was high, like the Norway example was, wonderful. If it was low, wonderful. It's $2,800 a day.
That's incredible. And you were worth every penny.
Well, thank you.
No, it's true. I mean, my audience, you've been on Russ on the Radio. It's your second time, too much time in between. And whenever I call you, I'm just a little background. Whenever I call you and have a question, you don't even hesitate. You answer my question and I say thank you. You say you're welcome, and that's it. And
I got a friend.
Yes, and I appreciate our friendship. You are a class act for sure. And I'm going to continue with some of this material that I've researched. I didn't even know. So, how about the part about Apollo 15, 16, and 17 at NASA?
Yeah, this is one of those things about if you keep your ears open, pay attention to what's going on around you, opportunities open up. If I walk into a room and there's an interesting person in there, I'm talking to them sitting up close and personal with them within minutes, sometimes seconds. And therefore, I've met some of the most interesting people in the world, kings, queens, presidents, crazy people. Spent 9 hours in Charlie Manson's cell at San Quentin, chatting with him. And so I have a little list of famous people that other people may have heard of that I've worked with and so on. And the two that leap out at people are always Charlie Manson and the Apollo astronauts. Well, back to listening carefully. I had a distributor in Holiday Magic Cosmetics, a beautiful lady named Jeannie Harrington, and Jeannie and her husband lived in Florida. I lived in California at the time. Still do again now, but different stay. And I knew that he had something to do with NASA. And these were in the days when you got up early and turned on the television to watch a rocket launch. They were so unusual and death-defying and so on. So the Apollo program started. 13, as you recall, blew up on the way to the moon, but we got them back. Apollo 11 was the first one to land on the moon, etc. One of my little claims to fame is 12 people have walked on the moon. I've shaken the hand of every one of them. Most of them are gone now, but
wow.
So anyway, I called Jeannie and I said, what is it that Jim does? And she said, well, he's the launch test supervisor of the manned space program. I said, wow, I'd love to hang out with him someday or something. I'd probably met him, but our issue then was cosmetics, and she was a retail cosmetics. She said, well, Apollo 14 is about to launch. You want to come down and watch it and stay with us? And I said, are you kidding me? She said, no, you'll be in the VIP stands and meet all sorts of interesting people. So I said, of course. Got on the plane, flew down there because it was only a few days away, sat in the VIP stands, watched Apollo 14 take off. I didn't have anything to do with that, but watched it. Unbelievable experience. But the night before, they'd had a picnic or a backyard barbecue at their house, and they'd invited the astronauts that Jim was currently working with, the astronauts of Apollo 15, 16, and 17, and many of the ground crews of those three shots. So I went down. I didn't really have an autograph book with me, but I felt like I ought to, with my autograph book, I'm going to meet all these famous people. Well, they had built me up so much that the astronauts and the ground crews came to the barbecue to meet me. Which I'm thinking, hello, I sell cosmetics. It's not a big deal. But being a natural seminar leader, when they gathered around my feet in the living room, I started into, tell us what you do. Well, I help the human potential movement and started much of it, the modern human potential movement. And we do this and we teach people this. And I have my People Builders program at San Quentin where we took the recidivism rate. People get out of prison and then come back within 2 years was 68% the day I walked into San Quentin. After we'd been in business with People Builders long enough to have a record, we discovered that of the graduates of People Builders, which was a 12-week course, those who got out, less than 5% came back in 2 years. So they want to know how that worked and so on. And then one of the astronauts, I think it was Jim Irwin, commander of Apollo 15, said, Ben, being an astronaut has a limited time span for a variety of reasons, not the least of which it was death-defying. But he said, I want to know, I'd like to work with you what I do when I get out of the astronaut corps, the Space Corps. And I said, fine. And the conversation took a shift. And before it was over, Jim Irwin said that night, well, I think I speak for all of us here. You're now our attitude coach. And that included Apollo 15, 16, and 17. So I started doing work with them on how to sell the space program better, a technique they still use to this day, and how to build a speaking career, and almost all of them did. If it was a semi-famous astronaut that did anything of note, he or she went out on the speaking tour and made much more money speaking than as an astronaut. I told them how to market themselves, etc. So when I say I was the attitude coach for Apollo 15, 16, 17, I'm not talking about anything technical. I am a high school graduate. I can barely start my car, never mind launch a rocket to the moon. But I know the things that make launching a rocket to the moon much more feasible, and that's building up people. So that's what I did with them.
Wow, I've never heard that story either. Every time we talk, you amaze me. I can't use any other. Well, how's your voice doing? Okay, are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, you sound a little better. You sound a little better. I've read recently that you're doing a podcast in California. I think it's in California. Can you explain some of that? And I'm sure it goes over some of the material. And you have a co-host. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, she has a co-host. I'm the co-host. Her name is Denise Griffiths, Griffitts, and it's denisegriffith.com. YourPartnerInSuccessRadio.com. And our broadcast is the Closer's Inner Circle podcast. Not unlike Jeannie Harrington, I heard about Denise and the great work she was doing, and I tuned in a couple of times without her knowledge. And then I called her one day for advice, and I said, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. However, my schedule is pretty full all the time anyway. To book guests, do a podcast, do the research and so on, and you know this better than just about anyone, takes a lot of time, and I'm not sure I have it, and therefore I can't really be regular. She said, well, what do you want? And I said, well, probably what I'm looking for is someone who's already doing a podcast who could benefit from my assistance and reputation and knowledge of selling. And I would join them occasionally or regularly or as a co-host. And I said, do you know anybody like that? She said, me, and every Wednesday from now on, you're my co-host. So I went from thinking about having a podcast to co-hosting one of the top 2% podcasts in the world just by asking, which is also another secret of selling. Ask.
That is great. And tell us something special that you do on it. Just review it real quick, the podcast.
Well, usually what we do is we pick a chapter out of one of my books. I've written 35 books on selling and success, the Closers being the most famous. But we decide at the end of every broadcast, she usually says to me, what are we doing next week? And next week, right now, is The Real Objection Is You. It's a chapter in the Closers Part 2 that starts on page 59. And if the listeners have their own book, which I encourage, of course, they can read in advance and have their questions ready or send us emails or whatever. But left raw bones, we announce a week in advance what we're going to be discussing, and then we discuss it. Plus any email questions that have come in the meantime, which is what I really prefer, because then people are asking things that they need to know, not what I thought they needed to know when I wrote the book years ago. And so we do a Q&A, or at least answer your questions that we've received by mail or email or what have you. And then, of course, if I'm talking about a chapter in the book, that particular chapter I just noticed because I flipped over to see what we'll be doing next week is only about 3 pages long. But I'll talk about it for 45 minutes because talking about it reminds me of other things, or how I got to that position, or how I knew that stuff. And one of the things, Russ, you've been very kind to say nice things about me, and they're all mutually felt with you. You're a top-notch gentleman personally, and your podcast and the way you handled it is wonderful. So take it as a compliment, but I mean it sincerely.
Thank you, Ben. That means the world to me. Believe you only knew.
Thank you. One of the things that I'm able to do from all the interesting people I've met, people like you, I've quoted you on other people's podcasts. I've talked to them about the class act that you are. The first time I was with you, we did a podcast. I've done hundreds, if not a few thousand of them now. And I get in the mail, I keep it right here on my desk. I have it in my hand, a CD album, only has one CD in it, so it's thin, but it says interview with Russ, our featured guest, Ben Gay III, topic for the week, sales training. That, Russ, of all the ones I've done, is the only one I've ever, people say thank you, and they put it up in their library and people can access them and so on. But that's the only CD with a red, white, and blue cover, et cetera, that I've ever received from anybody. That is just so classy, which is the reason it still sits on my desk after all this time.
Well, that's, boy, does that make me feel good. Yeah, that was a special gift for you, yes. And I appreciate you doing it with me.
Well, I appreciate it, and I show it to people in case they don't know I'm a big deal. I say, let me show you something. And I get out my CD from Russ on the radio, and I show it to them. And, it's like a lot of things that the closers, minus me, you never would have heard of the closers. But on the other hand, if a person wants to build a speaking career, consulting career, and so on, get with somebody and get a book written. The closers is my passport to credibility. And if people have known me before the closers, I'm its passport to credibility. But it's like having the good housekeeping seal of approval. People put far more stock, perhaps, than they should have in a published author than they would if they weren't a published author. So I would encourage your listeners, if it fits into the direction you're going, start writing.
Yes, absolutely, Ben. We are coming up to the end. Do you believe this 58 minutes is how you've been talking through COVID, and bless you for taking the time and energy and not feeling well to do Russ on the radio. And I really appreciate you for doing that.
Zig used to say Ben Gay would work a traffic accident.
Well, there you go. He's a smart guy. So we have a couple minutes, probably 3-4 minutes. How about giving us your contact information? Any last thoughts or anything you want to talk about? It's you.
Super. If you want to get the closers, and if you're serious about selling, don't already have them, you need to get the closers, at least the closers parts 1 and 2, but I'll send you to a site that shows some of the other material. Go to, and this site, by the way, you might want to write it down, comes with special pricing. They sell it for less than I sell my material at my own website. I charge shipping, they don't. So for special pricing and free shipping on the closers material, go to stores, stores.ebay.com/Ronzoni Books. That's all one word, RONZONEBOOKS. Now, even though you're ordering from them, they're local to me. They will bring me your books, and I will sign them and date them. And then they'll still go out. If ordered before 2, they'll go out the same day. And as I said, special pricing and free shipping. So that's how you order books, etc. I also have a mentoring program. If you're interested, where I do for people what Dr. Napoleon Hill did for me for a lot less money. He charged me $50,000 a year 50 years ago. So that's about $500,000 a year now to be my mentor and close personal friend. And I still do for others exactly what he did for me. Shoot me an email. Just go to B as in Ben, F as in Frank, G as in Gay, 3, the number 3, BFG3 at DirectCon, DirectCon, short for Direct Connect, .net. Send me an email and just tell me you're interested in the mentoring program. I'll be more interested in mentoring you if you've already ordered the book. So be sure and mention that. And if there's some reason we should have direct contact, give me a call, 530-409-0080.
Yeah, you answer your own phone.
I do.
Yeah, I know. It's incredible.
That came from one of my mentors. His name was Ray Considine, one of my great personal friends. He's gone now, and mentor. And one day he came into the office, so he had to buzz his way through the front door into the reception area, then get through my secretary's secretary, then get through my secretary, and finally he's in my office on the fifth step. And then the phoning in was a similar process. And so he's sitting there, and we've been talking. He said, Ben, let me ask you a question. He said, I write down almost everything you do. He was older than I was, but he was kind enough to claim he learned from me. He said, what benefit do you find in putting layers of people between you and your customers? And I gave the typical executive answer, well, I'm busy and I'm important. And he said, I said, what are you telling me, Ray? He said, put a phone on your desk, publicize the phone number, and let any one of your 1 million distributors around the world phone it and get you, or at worst, voicemail. And so I did, and I've been answering my own phone ever since.
It works.
It's effective.
It's very effective. Wow, this has been great, and we're coming. Because of the technical difficulty, Ben, I usually play music at the end, and I think we bypassed all the music. I mean, this is going to be a special interview. I mean, isn't it great?
I'm thrilled with it.